Let's mention this Philly Proud Boys story, Zach Rehl. Dawn has highlighted it in her news a couple of times this morning. Dawn, I'm sure you'll talk about it on your show as well. And I definitely want to get your thoughts here as well, because you have done a great job covering this story on a very consistent basis, and you've been all over it. So yesterday, we find out that Zachary Rehl was found guilty, a federal jury in Washington convicting him of plotting to carry out one of the most serious attacks on the nation's halls of power in centuries. This is courtesy of the Philadelphia Inquirer, so you know the wording will certainly have a certain slant to it. The guilty verdict in the seditious conspiracy case against Rehl, 37 of Port Richmond, found guilty of the rarely used sedition charge. His attorney, Carmen Hernandez, saying, quote, "It doesn't make sense. How did Rehl, this nice guy, become labeled as a violent insurrectionist?" Well, the Philadelphia Inquirer says the answer, evidence presented during the 4-month trial, showed lies largely in Rehl's own words. And leading up to this point, I do want to say this. I do believe that Jacob Chansley, Zachary Rehl's, from a due process standpoint, I do believe their rights were violated. I do not believe they were given the right to a speedy and fair trial. But at the end of the day, I am consistent when it comes to personal accountability and responsibility, whether that's a left-wing lunatic or somebody on January 6th. And in this situation, I want to bring this back to Jordan Neely for a moment, because what was that Marine, 24-year-old Marine, supposed to do or supposed to know? Because those who don't know you, your background or your demeanor, your state of mind, and past actions or words have to go on the information that you have in that moment at that very time. And that's what we base decisions off of. So when I look at the situation with Zachary Rehl, and this is the Inquirer saying, while he said he now views what unfolded on January 6th as a, quote, disgrace, he insisted that he came to Washington on January 6th only to, quote, get his voice heard, and only learned afterward that the protest he thought he'd participated in had become a violent riot. The prosecutors balked at Rehl's self-portrayal and maintained that his image of an ultimately harmless, hard-drinking, quote, own-the-libs instigator was carefully crafted to obscure the more serious threat that he and his co-defendants posed. They go on to say about talking about January 6th, that this was meant to just rile up the normies, I guess is the normal crazy people. A former Marine, Rehl insisted from the witness stand that his service record demonstrated his respect for law and order, yet in private chats with other Proud Boy members after the 2020 election, he endorsed, quote, firing squads for the traitors that are trying to steal the election. He also went on to say that some other people that defended the Capitol on the 6th were turncoats who deserved to be tarred and feathered. And video surfaced during the trial that appeared to show him attacking police outside the Capitol with pepper spray, an incident that he maintained on the stand he could not recall. And I'm going to be consistent with this one as well. I am very much pro-police. So when you attack a police officer, regardless of your political party or ideology, I can't defend you on that. So those are a few things that I will remain consistent on. And there's a quote here that says, a lot of times, and this I believe was from his attorney, a lot of times people say they're going to show up and do this or do that, and they really want to silence their opponent. It's bluster. It's trash talk. The point of activism is to make your opponents uncomfortable. Now, I agree at the last part with uncomfortable, but when you sit there and say, we're going to show up and do this or that, and a lot of people say it's just bluster, it's trash talk, well, if people don't know you or your history, they have to take what they hear or see or read on face value. So, and he also said, there's also a quote here from the U.S. Attorney Connor Mulrow that says, social media is not a private diary. And I'm going to bring that back to the audio clip we played for you on Monday with the young black kid from Georgia during the NFL draft that was spewing Asian hate on his Instagram Live when the Falcons took a player that or when the Eagles took a player that the kid from Georgia ultimately wanted the Atlanta Falcons to take. When you go live on your social media and you spew that, you just really show how stupid you are. You're making those things public. So I say all of that with the consistencies I try to keep is, do I think Zach Rehl is a major threat? I do not. And do I think he should serve up to 20 years? No, I do not. But when you take some of these quotes and you hear some of these people saying the things they do, and you don't know one way or the other whether that's just bravado or if that's something that can really come to fruition, you got to take it for what it's worth. And I do believe to some extent that Zachary Rehl's, I don't think he's a terrible guy, but sometimes you're your own worst enemy and you shoot yourself in the foot, so to speak. And I think that's what happened here. But I will say this as well. My last point, and I certainly want you to chime in as well. I think he's being made an example of.
Of course.
There's a lot of people that were charged and, they either, pled out or blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, you got Chansley, who was out, I believe, now after, 34 months or whatever it was. There's going to be somebody that takes the wrong end of it, unfortunately. And it looks like it might be the local guy, Zachary Rehl. So, Dawn, the floor is yours. You've covered this brilliantly, better than anybody. And I'm sure you have opinions to go along with all the facts that you were reporting.
Well, first of all, I would say Rehl, who on the stand, they made the point. He, by the way, is a graduate of Northeast Prep, Temple University, served the United States as a Marine honorably, son and grandson, Philadelphia police officers. So on the stand talked about that he has abiding respect for law and order and for law enforcement. Initially, when it was learned that he would take the stand, because you don't have to take the stand, there were legal analysts who said that's always a risky move.
Right.
And so, sure enough, they came up with some pictures that were not as clear in the video or the imaging, but the prosecutors said, well, you say you didn't do anything against police, but here are these images that show you pepper spraying officers, law enforcement officers. You couldn't see it clearly enough. His attorney tried to argue that it was his phone. He was taking pictures, but it was not a good moment, as they were saying, you were doing this you were pepper spraying. You did this. And then when he said, I can't recall, or something to that effect, it was not a good look.
No.
Clearly. And it was, to me, it was too risky of a move to put him on that stand. The jurors, had that moment, because keep in mind, he was never charged with any act of violence, and he was never charged with destroying anything, because initially they didn't have any of those images. So they did find him with something in his hand, and they made that allegation, and it was a really bad moment for him in the court. He did apologize on the stand. He did, as you mentioned, say that what unfolded on January 6th was a disgrace. Looking back, he was reflecting on that, and he did apologize publicly in that courtroom, and he said, I really do truly apologize. So he said that. The problem with this case is that, and why I think that it will be successful upon appeal, is that prosecutors accused Rehl. They said that these guys riled up the crowd, quote, using social media as a megaphone to radicalize those followers. So this will probably end up, I don't know, at the Supreme Court.
Could very
level.
well be, yeah.
It will be appealed. But to me, to your point, and to what I think everybody's thinking about this, clearly these guys were on trial not because of anything that they did. It's all about Trump. Because if you want to say that Trump led the insurrection, somebody's got to be convicted with something. So they went to this literally Civil War era charge, which is very rare.
Yep.
and they put these guys, to this level, and they say, "Hey, we didn't charge this young man with anything as far as physical violence. They didn't charge him. That's not the charge. The charge is you, by your words, your social media post. You use that social media like a megaphone. You riled people up, and you radicalized these followers, and you caused a quote unquote insurrection. I don't think that charge stands the test of time once it goes to SCOTUS.
I agree.
I don't think so.
I'm just surprised that he would go against his attorney's advice, and I'm assuming his attorney advised him about pleading the fifth and not incriminating himself and not taking a stand. A lot of times, people, like the layman viewpoint is, oh, he's not taking the stand, he's not going to defend himself, he must have something to hide. A lot of times you shoot yourself in the foot by going up there.
The fact of the matter is that you should not put yourself in bad situations.
Yeah.
And
but that's easy. But that's easy to say.
It's not.
If I'm his relative,
it's not.
If I'm his relative, I'm going to go, what the heck were you thinking? You know what I mean? If I'm his sister-in-law, to say your wife was pregnant, what the heck were you thinking? I'm sure he's been sitting in jail for more than 2 years. Don't you think he's been saying that?
All we do on this show is talk about law and order. If we're going to be consistent and defend law and order, then you have to be consistent and defend law and order. The end.
Yeah, my only criticism.
So you think?
Of him,
so you think that this person who's never been convicted of who has a clean record, who went and did something stupid by his own account, you think he deserves to spend 20 years of his life in prison?
No, I don't. But there needs to be some sort of.
Do we think though he'll spend more time in prison than Chansley did? Chansley had what, 34 months, 38 months, something to that effect. Who's also, I believe, Chansley's due process rights were violated. Remember, his attorney had no access to all this video footage that Tucker Carlson got. Remember how Tucker showed, and basically Chansley was just walking around, escorted around like he was on a field trip, which had that been available to his defense attorney in his trial, he probably doesn't sit in jail for 32 months or whatever it was.
Well, he's already been in jail for 26 months.
Yeah.
He's already been in prison.
Which is why I think his due process rights were violated. My only complaint, what I believe is irrefutable to Rehl is you can't tell me, now this is assuming he really did use pepper spray, and I know the picture is not, the clarity's not great, so there's still stuff up for debate or interpretation. You can't claim to be you say, I respect law and order and I stand by police, and then pepper spray him in the face. Like, I'm sorry.
True.
You can't do that.
I mean, that moment.
If he did that.
Right. If he did that, if he did do that, I think to say I don't recall, if he did, he should have, in my humble opinion, you're on the stand, you need to then tell the truth and say, you know what, I did do that, and I'm horrified. You know what I mean? You need to come clean. Yeah. But he didn't. He said, I don't recall. Yeah. So,
Not a good answer.
So none of this is, I'm not condoning any of this stuff, nor are these guys. No, he's saying the words disgrace, that he regrets it. I truly apologize. Those are the words. But the question is, do these men, especially this one, who served our country, right, and who's never done anything criminal, shoplifting, zero criminal record, does he really deserve to be incarcerated until he's nearly 60 years old?
These individuals are being made an example of. There's no question in my mind.
But on social media, they're saying he should get the death penalty.
No,
you know that, right?
Those people are insane. But again, we talk about the two-tier justice system. Let's go back to the big take this morning. Our subway guy has been arrested 40 times. And he was on the streets.
For assault.
Right. And this guy, clean record, and he's going to go away for 20 years?